Hey guys, Scott here. Today I want to talk about the new Nicolas Cage perk called Dramaturgy. I've not been seeing too much discussion on the fact that it's kind of similar to the old Dead Hard for distance, and I'm basically bringing up a conversation of why that is. Now, blanket statement before I go further, it's not as strong as the old Dead Hard in my opinion. I don't think this perk needs to be nerfed or anything like that, but I do want to go over ways that it is similar and ways that it is actually an extremely powerful perk, if not the best exhaustion perk in the entire game. So, what Dramaturgy does, you press the button, you do a little jig that locks you into a direction for like half a second, basically like Dead Hard, and then after that, you gain 2 seconds of 25% haste. After that, you can gain one of four various effects. The first effect is you gain a random item. In this case, I got a Commodious toolbox with screw and wire spool, which is the best toolbox in the entire game. You can get the ability to just, I guess not an ability, you just scream randomly, which reveals your position. You can gain 25% haste again for another 2 seconds, or you can become exposed for 12 seconds. I'm not even really going to focus on the RNG components of the ability too much. What I really want to talk about is the actual controllable speed burst that you get from just the 25% for 2 seconds. Now, let's go into the actual math of what Dead Hard was. Old Dead Hard made you move about 4 meters in half a second. It effectively doubled your speed for half a second, and it also gave you iframes during that. Now, Dead Hard didn't really work like that. It works on a strange curve where you would move at 250% movement speed for 0.1 second, and then 200% movement speed for 0.4 seconds. It was a very weird curve, but functionally, you'd cover a bit over 4 meters in half a second. Which means you were moving, at 8 meters a second or double the speed of a normal player. Now, with this perk, you move 25% faster for 2 seconds. Basically, if you do the math, it's going to boil down to covering 10 meters of distance in those 2 seconds. So you cover more distance. You cover almost double the distance of Dead Hard. However, it's spread across a 4 times as long duration. So you're really only going 2.5 meters per half a second, whereas Dead Hard is 4 meters, a little bit more than that, per half a second. So Dead Hard is going to get you somewhere faster in a shorter amount of time, but it's a much shorter overall distance that you gain. So what this means is the correct way to use this perk is not like Dead Hard. You wouldn't use it right as you're about to get to a powder window for that extra distance. You have to plan a bit more ahead, and this is the first reason I think it's not quite as good as Dead Hard. With Dead Hard, you can make a loop. You can go, oh shit, this killer's too close. Pallet, good, safe. With this perk, you kind of have to play around it a bit more, and if you're smart with the perk, it's actually stronger than Dead Hard at certain tiles. For example, like Shack or something like that. Because tiles that are straight lines like that, if you know the killer is too close to you, you can, instead of just greeting it right before you get to the pallet, you have to make a bit more of a call, 2 seconds prior that, okay, I can't get another loot from this now. Now I have to use this perk, but I'm going to gain more distance than if I would have done it with Dead Hard. Now, because of speed differentials, it's not quite that simple because the killer is also moving during that 2 second period and they're moving less during that half a second period. So again, it's not really quite the same, but it functionally on straight tiles has roughly the same effect of old Dead Hard. However, if you're on like short tiles or tiles that have like rounded corners like rock loops or junk tiles, anything like that, then Dead Hard is objectively better because that burst of speed is confined to a much smaller space, whereas having a 2 second speed burst in a direction that's slower is going to be less, it's going to be less effective because you're going to be spending a lot of that doing the little jig, which, locks you in that certain direction. And it's not as an immediate speed gain as Dead Hard. So that's why at most tiles, Dead Hard is still going to be better. I do think at tiles like Shack, for example, it's going to be maybe not better, but as good as the old Dead Hard, which is a frightening, concept in general. So the perk itself, just having 25% movement speed for 2 seconds is really good. Now, there is the possibility you have a 1 in 4 chance of getting an additional 25% movement speed for 2 seconds, which would be, even better. And the thing is, this is going to let you cover less distance than something like Sprint Burst, but the thing is, it's on demand wherever you want in any loop. So getting to any loop or any window, it's still going to be extremely good. Even ignoring the secondary effects of the perk, it's still going to be extremely good to just get that little boost to where you need to go. Again, not quite as good as old Dead Hard, because that perk also had iframes too, so even ranged killers couldn't adjust for that additional distance and throw a hatchet or Deathslinger shoot you or whatever they were going to do. So that is still going to be weaker than Dead Hard. Things like Demogorgon lunges or Wesker charges, all of these things were negated by Dead Hard. That won't be negated by this. Now, it's going to be harder to hit someone moving way faster, but you can still physically hit them. And that's, I think, the important part. So you need to be smarter with Dramaturgy. You need to use it earlier than Dead Hard. And because of that, it takes more skill to use. And so if you can, at certain tiles, get almost the same effect as regular Dead Hard, I feel like that's pretty balanced because it's not just like a free thing anymore. You actually have to be pretty smart about how you're using the perk. Now, there's actually the other sides of it as well. I'm going to go ahead and say this. The downsides are not really downsides at all. This is pretty much a solely upside perk. You can get an extremely good random item. You can gain your movement speed again an additional time. And the other downside of Screaming, who cares? If you're using it, typically you're being followed by the killer. If you're using it just to generate items, I guess that wouldn't be the case, but just do that when the killer's chasing someone else or something. If you just randomly decide to scream, I mean, that's on you, man. Like, you controlled that. So I don't really consider the screaming to be a downside whatsoever. The expose thing, I don't really even consider a downside either, because any player worth his salt is going to use this to get to a window or a pallet. You're not just going to be in an open field and use this and risk the 1 and 4 down. That would just be stupid. So what you're going to do is use this when you're approaching something that you can use to loop the killer for an additional 12 seconds, which, in my opinion, is basically every single time. If you're at any tile like this, you're going to be able to last an additional 12 seconds if you gain that speed burst. And that's basically the main point, that the downsides are very, very minor. They're barely downsides. In my opinion, this perk either has nothing or only upsides. So Dramaturgy is extremely good. Is it as good as Old Dead Hard? No. Due to the way that speed differentials work, you're going to be... It's more important to move fast quickly than cover a greater distance a bit slower, if that makes sense. So if you plan ahead, this perk at certain tiles like Shack can be just about as good as Old Dead Hard, but that's about the maximum capacity it will ever have. It's harder to use. You have to do way more planning. It's not free. You can only use it while you're healthy, which means at the start of the game is when it's strongest. And typically you need perks to let you live later in the game when you're starting to die. Your team is starting to die. You're just off the hook. You're injured. These are the times you need these perks to help you out. When you're healthy, it's less significant because you're under less stress. You're under less danger at the current moment. So reasons it's not as good as Dead Hard is because it happens over a longer period of time and because it's used when you're only healthy. And these are typically situations where you're already in a bit of a safer spot. Dead Hard saves you when you need it the most, and that's why Dead Hard is going to be pretty much always stronger than this perk, at least the old Dead Hard. All that being said, I'm comparing Dramaturgy to one of the most broken perks in the entire game. Old Dead Hard was insanely overpowered. So the fact that this sometimes can approach that level of strength is a bit worrying. Do I think the perk needs a nerf? No, I think everything with Nicolas Cage is just fucking hilarious, and I'm okay with all of this, so I'm not asking for a nerf. I just think it will be one of the best exhaustion perks in the entire game when used properly. I think this is going to have sort of the effect of hyper-focus where people think the perk is bad because they're bad. They're not good enough to use the perk. Rest assured, this is one of the best, if not the best exhaustion perk in the game when used correctly. But most people are just not very good at the game, so you don't have to worry about that as much. So will this perk be as problematic as Old Dead Hard? No, it won't be. Will it be very good? Yes. This is going to be an extremely good perk.